The authority, passionate, magnetic, alpha, commanding, influencing, inspiring, persistent, positive, driven, successful. This is who we are as pros.
This is Turning Pro Academy, your number one resource for creating the business, lifestyle, and freedom you want. Learn to build an epic life with the no BS, proven online business mastery. The real world advice and strategies used by the world's best so that you can live your dream.
Welcome to the Turning Pro Academy. I'm your host and your coach, Chris Dufay, and I'm very thankful for you being here with me and amped to get into this with you. This episode is about how to build an online business with a master of it, Corbett Barr. Corbett and I are delving into the realms of what really matters to build a lifestyle business. The major focus for marketing, how to build raving fans. We're also delving into how content marketing is so important for you and your business, how to produce content the right way and answering the quality and quantity question of it, and how you can become a successful entrepreneur. And when dealing with thousands of others that are doing it, what it really boils down to when deciding on what makes a difference to you, to your profits, and to your success. What you take away from today's episode, I know will have you more confident, in charge, and taking the right action. So strap yourself in because this episode is chock full of greatness. And as a thanks for plugging me in between your ears and for you joining the Turning Pro Academy team, I want you to pay the love forward. Introduce one person into getting subscribed and tuning in to this podcast. And also jump on and give me an iTunes review. Put a smile on my dial on your phone right now, wherever you are. If you're doing some cardio, if you're out walking, if you're driving, pull over. And if you're loving and getting great insights and advice from this, let me know. A 5-star review will get this into the ears of the people that need it and will have my heart smiling. And are you wanting to burn fat, build and transform your body? Then you're going to want to head on over to Fit Body Pro podcast, as over at fitbodypro.com. This is my other podcast, and I know I'm gluttonous with having two, but this is specially for the advanced, proven strategies and plans and advice to shaping your body to how you want to look and doing it the right way. But with the Turning Pro, head on over to turningproacademy.com so you can get the show notes and links from this episode and every other episode. I've just given so much away. And also as a special thank you for you being here, the free online workshops where you get the insights from the 6-figure PT program to use for yourself. If you want to have a flow of clients coming to you, and also if you want to double your income online, these free online workshops I'm giving away will give you those exact steps. So make sure that you don't miss out on that. It is time now to bring on Corbett and for us to unleash some awesomeness. The formidable Corbett Barr, thank you so much for coming onto the Turning Pro Academy podcast. I'm pumped to have you here because, one, I'm a huge fan of yourself and everything that you are doing. And also, I just know that you are going to be unveiling some killer insights for the audience right now. So, Corbett, thank you so much, mate.
Thanks a lot, Chris. What did you call me? Formidable?
Formidable. Do you like that? Did I just pop a cherry with you being formidable?
Yeah, that's pretty good. I like it.
Okay, well, let's stick with that then. Okay, so anyone that doesn't know who you are, can you please tell them who Corbett Barr is and why you were so phenomenal?
Why I'm so phenomenal. I love it. I am an entrepreneur. I've been self-employed for about 10 years. And my first go around was a traditional, if you will, maybe in air quotes, a traditional Silicon Valley venture capital backed startup. And I learned a lot from that experience. But at the end of the day, I had jumped into entrepreneurship. And I guess that I had some vision of what that would be. And after building an office and hiring 10 or 15 employees and having a co-founder and investors and a board of directors, even though I was an entrepreneur, I ended up feeling like I had less freedom and less control over my life than I did when I was a consultant as an employee. And so I hit the reset button, and partly it was because the business wasn't doing that well. This was in 2008 at the end of the financial collapse, and I was really left with a lot of hard choices. And so I hit the reset button, and my wife and I actually took a 6-month sabbatical road trip to Mexico, where I thought I would come up with my next business idea and that eventually I would pitch it to VCs again. But this time around, maybe I would just try to retain more control over how I ran my business. But actually, something completely different happened. And that was that while we were on the road, we kept meeting people who weren't rich and weren't retired, but somehow had figured out ways to spend many months every year living in a foreign country. And some of these people took their jobs with them. Some people were able to put their careers on hold. But the common thread was that these people had figured out ways to put their lives ahead of their career, and yet their careers were still thriving. And so I started a blog about this. This was back in 2009. I started a blog while I was on this road trip, and really just to ask myself questions out loud about the nature of life and career and the balance between the two, and what really matters in life, and how you might be able to live this sort of interesting, rich lifestyle as if you were retired, even though you weren't. And that was over 6 years ago. And since then, basically, I built a business around creating content, which was, I know, something you wanted to get into.
Okay, this is absolutely fantastic because obviously, and okay, just so I had a podcast right before yourself, Corbett, and it was for, I'm actually quite gluttonous. I've got 2 podcasts. The other one was for fitness. And the guy I was talking to, Brandon, he was actually in Colombia, and we were both laughing how I'm sitting here in Bali, he's in Colombia, and we're obviously running our businesses. And now I've got the pleasure of sitting down, and now you and I are being able to delve into the topics that you want, and we share our conversation with the listener as well. And I was really thinking about what's the difference with, say, the lifestyle business creation and, say, the VC-backed business or startups. Obviously, like, what's the difference with the essence of the person running it?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it comes down to what your long-term goals are.
Mm-hmm.
In a VC-backed startup, the real goal is to build something really big as fast as you can, so that all of the different people who have their hand in the pocket of the company are able to pull out something at the end, because you have, investors, employees, and all kinds of other interests who basically are involved in this entity because they expect it to sell at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
With a lifestyle business, really what the owner is trying to do is to satisfy his or her own more short to mid-term interests, I would say, and to be able to really support a lifestyle and to work on something that they feel is worthwhile, even though the idea might not be all that interesting to big money investors.
Awesome. Now, I'm going to be completely upfront, Corbett, and I want to share this with yourself and the listener. Being myself in the position that I'm now, obviously I have the lifestyle business running the 3 businesses at the moment, really enjoying it, able to live anywhere in the world. Financials is obviously no problem at all, but I have been struck like a slap in the face with an idea that I've been thinking a lot about recently. And that was like, I want to leave a bigger legacy on the world, a bigger footprint. I want to help more people around the world transform themselves. Is that starting to blur the lines in between what the lifestyle is and kind of moving more over into the other side?
That's a great question. And to be honest, I've met a lot of people and have experienced myself this idea that you can pursue building a lifestyle business as if it's the one key to happiness.
Mm.
And once you get there, you can realize that it's not necessarily the key to happiness. It does change a lot of things about your life, and it can open up a lot of opportunities. But like everything, really the pursuit is the thing that makes us happy, not the attainment.
Yes.
And so, I think that at this point, it sounds like you are feeling like you're ready for a new challenge. And I don't know if that makes it a candidate for an investor class business, because investors or usually are looking for businesses that can sell for in the hundreds of millions and up. So they have to believe that your opportunity can reach, a lot of people and earn a lot of revenue. And not to say that your idea can't, but that's another thing that I think defines the difference between a lifestyle business and a venture capital backed business.
This is fantastic. And I think it's just kind of like one more probably question we can dive into before we move on is, do you find that, especially with the people that you work with and you help with in your business, Corbett, that one of the biggest issues to kind of hop, skip, and jump over is the actual self-belief of that, in quotations, entrepreneur?
In order to build a successful business?
Yeah, in order to build a successful business, but also to understand how big they want to go. Like, just for instance, I have so many trainers come on board the coaching and I go, right, what is the goal that you want? And they'll tell me, I'm like, dude, we can do that in 2 months. Like, if you want that, like, why don't you want more? And then, like, when you kind of like delving deep and delve into it, there's like, okay, it's the self-belief we have to change for them to really get what they want and what they believe they can achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that lack of self-belief or that sort of calibration of self-belief is why a lot of people never even try to be entrepreneurs, let alone you're talking about people who have fairly modest goals. I think there are people who have such low self-belief that they never even try. And I think it's a lot of things, but mostly it relates to this fear of failure. And really it's the fear of the unknown, because the failures that might happen don't end up being as traumatic as people think they are in their head. And I don't think they really even understand what a failure would look like. But once you've gotten to know a lot of entrepreneurs, we all have failure stories in our past. And to me, again, it's not the attainment, it's the journey. And failure is part of a really rich and interesting journey. And you look back on it, a decade later or whatever, and realize that struggle you were in was some of the best stuff that you experienced.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because really, if you define really what failure is, and then you obviously have that hindsight with it as well, it's just a learning curve that you have to go through to get where you want.
100%.
Like, really, I think one of the good ways to go about it is figuring out what is that worst possible scenario that could happen. And really, when you go back down to it, it's like, what, I might have to move home with my parents for a little while and then build back up. Yes, that's not great. Yes, if you're single, you might not be bringing anyone home, but at the end of the day, you're going to be able to then kind of move on and use what you've learned. Hopefully you've got that kind of like positive attitude that we can use and learn from it and then keep going.
Yeah, it also helps if you have met people around the world. I'm sure that you meet people in Bali who are basically penniless, and yet they're living these lives that are enviable because of their outlook on life and because of how resourceful they are at living with nothing. And where most of us would assume that we have to move back with our parents and live in the suburbs somewhere in some boring place, there are these other people who say, money isn't something that's going to hold me back from living the life that I want to live.
Absolutely brilliant. And I think that it just resonates so much with myself, because I took the leap. I had to take that leap for myself. One, moving from, say, when I moved from Sydney to Dubai to start the personal training business, then I had a brand new baby girl. And then together, we also then took the leap from, say, moving from Dubai, then moving to Bali, and then starting the online businesses. And obviously, there's so much more. I had the stress of, what does failure mean? It's not really moving back in with your parents. For myself, that wasn't the drama. It was I had mouths to feed. There's babies don't eat love. That's not how it works. So I think that's a really good point. Okay, now, Corbett, I think because the topic that we're really talking about and what we do as well is starting an online business, making money online, it's got a real douchery kind of snake oil salesman essence to it, which is kind of what I find what we're fighting against. That's the fight we're fighting with it. And I think what makes me cringe so much is people not earning the chops and then trying to teach people what to do and how to do it before they've done it themselves. It's kind of I'm teaching people how to make money online. And how did you make money online? By teaching people how to make money online. That does not work like that. And I think what you're doing so well, Corbett, is being able to show entrepreneurs what they need to do with starting an online business. So what I would love the listener to know is what are you finding the common mistakes with people endeavoring that?
One of the biggest mistakes relates back to what we were talking about earlier with self-belief. On the other end of that spectrum, people have issues with expectations. And a lot of the mistakes I see early on are people who are expecting things to happen And when they don't necessarily happen, that throws them off track and they end up getting stuck because, when you build a business, it's really a series of confronting challenges and trying to remain calm about those challenges and to be resourceful and to find ways to get past those challenges. And when people set expectations, they, who knows where they come from. But we all have to put a stake in the ground and say, I think in 6 months I can be doing this.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's reasonable and sometimes it's not. And sometimes things happen along the way that you can't anticipate. But what separates the people who end up going on to build something successful from those who maybe look back 20 years later and say, oh man, remember that time that I tried, to build something that was stupid, or I wish I'd stuck with it, or whatever regret you have. The people that are separated from that and go on to be successful are the ones who don't let the difference between reality and what their expectations were stop them in their tracks. They figure out a way to get past that. And so, I guess it's not necessarily, I'm not cautioning people not to set expectations. I'm just cautioning them to realize that expectations are simply guesses and that your reality is going to look much different from what you think it might right now when you're just getting started. And, just thinking back personally, if I had, set out to build this venture capital backed business and I set expectations that I was going to be a millionaire in a few years. And then in reality, somebody told me that, well, what's really going to happen is this whole thing's going to crumble in 3 years and you're going to be left with nothing. And you're going to have spent, X tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of your own personal savings to build this thing. And you're going to be left in a really hard position financially and emotionally. Are you still interested in building this business? If that's all I knew of the story, I might have thought twice about it. But when I got to that point in the story, I was able to pick myself up and dust myself off and say, you know what? There's something here about entrepreneurship that's deep in my soul. And I think it's worth another shot. And so then, you fast forward a few years later and I had built something that was successful and I was able to support myself. And I never would have guessed that that's where the story would have gone. And I think that theme of resiliency and resourcefulness, that's what you need as an entrepreneur because you're not going to be able to guess the future.
I wish I had a little sound effect button here that would be like bombs because I'd just be tapping it the whole time. That was just like knowledge bombs just going off Corbett. That was just like all the time. That was brilliant. Okay, excellent. Now, the other thing moving on from that is obviously when building an online business and both you and I agree upon is the importance of and use of content marketing and how I think this is so brilliant because I see the podcast as a real win-win. One, the listener is getting some really valuable insights, guidance and advice. And we are able to then be on the realm of giving that and then showing people that, one, we know what we're talking about, but myself being here as well, like how awesome is this? I'm sitting here, I'm able to talk to you, Corbett, and you are a brilliant person doing what you're doing. I wouldn't be able to just kind of like get it on a phone call with you. Like you wouldn't accept a phone call from me if I just said, hey, Corbett, can we have a chat? Like no one would do that. You'd be like, what do you want? Like what's in it for me? And there's no problems with that because everyone has to ask that about themselves. So how can the online entrepreneur start building content marketing and what realms are you finding working now? What realms do you find kind of slipping off the side? What do you think's the go?
So great questions there. And the entire business that I have now exists because I started a blog in 2009. So over 6 years ago, I started a blog on a whim and I had zero idea that it would lead to what it did. But now I run a 7-figure business with 4 really awesome employees, and that all exists. And I also, by the way, live in Mexico in the winters and travel to Europe in the summers and just have what I consider for me right now to be like the total package. And that all started because one week on a trip, I decided to start a blog, and a source of content like that can be very, very powerful. You are putting thoughts out there. And if you craft those thoughts in a way that touches something that people need or want or desire, then they're going to be attracted to you and they're going to start looking to you for answers. And those people that are searching for answers create opportunities for you to build products and services and to build a business. And that can happen with all forms of content. When I started out, blogging was really the thing. Since then, video and podcasting have really taken hold, and a lot of people are doing quite well with those. So I don't think it necessarily matters what form the content is. I think what matters is that you're comfortable with it, that you feel like you can show up week after week and put out something that's really compelling. And ultimately, what happens to most of us is that we get involved in all kinds of different content. We have, at my business, we put out a lot of videos. We do a weekly podcast. We publish blog posts every week. And that's kind of where things head. You also maybe do speaking engagements. You're active on social media. But in the beginning, you need to focus. You can't expect to, that's sort of like the triathlon to me. As an athlete, you might work up to being able to run, 26 miles and swim 2 miles and bike 100 or whatever an Ironman is. But you wouldn't expect to do that in the beginning. You would pick one of those things to get better at and to sort of make your mark and prove that you can do it. And then you would move on. And the same thing is true of content marketing. And so I caution against the idea of being everywhere in the beginning. And I really like to see people focus and hone their craft and get better at the one thing that they do well to begin with than their competition so that they can stand out.
I think that's really good. And you said something that I really agree upon was the content has to be compelling. And I think where a lot of people kind of first delve into this, they kind of ask the questions of quantity first. It's kind of like, how much should I be pumping out? And I think where a lot of people miss the boat is actually the quality of the content has to be. And as you said, it has to be compelling. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when I kind of hear compelling, that definition comes to it's very in tune with the market that you're trying to talk into, and the quality is high for them to want to lap it up.
Yeah, I think the reason people start with that question about quantity over quality, or just, they're not even thinking about quality, they're just thinking about quantity. The reason that they do that, it stems from this self-centered approach to building a business or to creating content, which is, me. How can I work the system so that I have this audience? And they're not thinking at all about the individuals on the other side of that blog post or the other side of that podcast. And so if you instead start by thinking about, who am I trying to reach? What are they struggling with? Why would they care about what I have to say? Then the answer to how much content should I put out is something you can find internally, because the answer is, I need to put out as much content as these people need to stay motivated, to stay connected, to feel like they trust me, to lead them somewhere on some journey. And that takes the guesswork out of saying, well, maybe I should publish once a month, or maybe I should publish 10 times a week or whatever, into, well, if I was on the other side of this and I was looking to Chris to lead me through a personal transformation of health and fitness, then how often would I want to hear from him? And what would I want to hear from him about? And it becomes much easier to answer those questions when you take the focus off of you and put the focus on your potential client.
I think that's just really, really well said. And I think it just kind of boils down to having that empathy for your audience and customers and clients as well. So you understand what their problems are, and then obviously you're adding that tremendous amount of value to help solve that problem.
Absolutely.
Okay, brilliant. So obviously the listener is going to pick one medium of content to produce, dive on deep, high quality, and then producing a quantity that obviously suits them and also suits the audience. How can we start then going from, right, I'm going to produce this content. How does this lead onto me having a movement of raving fans?
So this is going to take a while because, and this is again where expectations come in. There are a lot of things at play here that make a content strategy, that force a content strategy to have to be a longer term game. One of the things at play is that it's going to take you personally a while to get good at your craft, whether it be writing or videos or podcast or whatever. You may have heard of the 10,000 hour rule, just this idea that it takes some level of commitment and experience to get really good at something. Just like with, trying to compete in a triathlon, you wouldn't expect in a week to be out there competing with the world's best. And yet for some reason, when people start a podcast or a blog, if they're not in the top 10 rankings in the first month, then they feel like a failure. And I just think it's crazy to expect that. So you have to give it some time so that you can get better, and so that the different signals that all of the systems use to decide whether or not to send people your way. For example, if you have a podcast, you're going to be ranked in iTunes. If you're on social media, then you'll appear in different places based on how popular your content is. The search engines, they take a lot of time to learn signals about your site before they start sending you visitors. And all of this stuff will start to snowball at some point, but you have to give it time to work. The other thing is that you are going to have some hits and a lot of failures. You're going to take a lot of swings at the ball and you're going to miss, and you're going to put content out there and it's not going to resonate with anyone. But then every once in a while, something will come along where you're just particularly inspired and you publish something that really hits home with people. And I would love to say that people could do this every time, and it would be great to aim for that. But in reality, it just happens periodically. And these kinds of things, what I have called epic shit in the past, I've encouraged people to try to publish epic stuff. And when you do that, when that one piece of epic content comes along, it can make your career, or it can raise you to a new level, or get you past a plateau. This happens with most people. You'll look back at everything that you published and you'll realize there's just a couple of things that I did that people really connected with. And that's going to help you get through the plateau. But it takes time to have those hits. They're not going to happen right away. So give it time, and that audience will start building, and you have to stay finely attuned to your audience's feedback, because what you're really trying to do is, at first you sit down and you say, who's out there in the world and what problems do they have? And if I write something, will they be interested? And you put it out there. Well, eventually someone will find that, and maybe they'll leave a comment, or maybe they'll send you an email. And your job is to keep getting better and better at anticipating their needs and at giving them information and inspiration and techniques and things that they're really going to connect with, so that they feel like motivated to keep coming back to your site. And there's not a whole lot of magic in it. I've published hundreds and hundreds of different pieces of content over the years, well over 1,000 over the past 6 years. And what I learned along the way was that there's no secret formula or magic to it. It's just about showing up every day and trying to get a little bit better at understanding who your audience is and how you can help them, and at crafting that help in the form of a podcast or a blog post or a talk that you give or whatever it is.
Brilliant. Okay, so we've nailed a couple of really big important steps along the way with doing this. We're creating the content, we're then creating the followers. And I think it's a great point saying that you brought up, Corbett, with the expectations. I think so many people have expectations, but they're not educated expectations. Like, have you actually gone to people in the trenches that have done what you want to do and asked them, how long has it taken you to do this? And I think so many people haven't done that. And if they actually did ask, like, oh, you know what? It's very much a snowball effect as well. It's like at the start, there's nothing. But as you continue to do it, you continue to get better, you're going to start picking up people, and it starts kind of like picking up speed along the way. So I guess the next step that we have with this, Corbett, is how are you finding yourself with the business that you're run, or with the people that you work with, converting those followers and fans into paying customers and clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So there are, a handful of strategies when you're publishing a blog or a podcast or whatever that you'll need to pay attention to make sure that you're engaging with people and giving them a way to stay connected to you, because you're doing all of this work to put great content out there and to figure out how to create epic stuff and put it out in the world. That's not necessarily enough to make this snowball happen that we're talking about, because a lot of people will come to your site or hear your podcast, listen, and then move on. And they might have every intention of following you and coming back. But the reality is there are just so many voices out there these days that it's really easy to forget about someone. So you have to do your best to stand out. And then you have to subtly nudge people to subscribe or to follow you on social media or to stay connected in some way, and to get them into your circle so that there's an opportunity for them to come back. Because what we found is that in our business, and this isn't necessarily true of everyone, but in our business and a lot of the businesses that we work with, the sales cycle, if you will, of getting someone to actually purchase something from you ends up being a lot longer than you might think. I think a lot of people think about this idea of a sales funnel where someone comes to my blog, they read an article, they read another article, they click over to my product, and then they click buy. In reality, what happens is somebody reads an article from you and then they move on and they forget about you. And then maybe they stumble on something that you wrote again a couple of months later and they're like, oh, interesting. That Chris guy, I remember him from before. And then at the bottom of an article, maybe they see a subscribe link. And so they sign up for your email newsletter. And then they're reading your stuff in their inbox once in a while over the course of a couple of months, and on and on and on. And this sales cycle ends up taking a few months, or sometimes 6 months, or even a year. We find people sometimes who sign up for one of our products, and they'll tell me that they followed me for 2 years and they're just now getting around to being a customer. So that important step there is that content isn't just, something that you put out, somebody reads, and that it leads directly to a sale. It's something that you put out that's going to create a relationship with people. And the goal of that relationship is to get them to feel comfortable with you, to get to know you, to trust you, and then ultimately to start believing that you're capable of providing answers that are deeper than the content.
Brilliant. Okay, Corbett, now you've just smashed this out of the park, and this has been a very tactical, strategic kind of chat that we've had for the listener. And one more question that I kind of want to hit is a little bit different. And that's kind of like something that I was thinking about the other day. And this is kind of like the roller coaster or bipolar of being an entrepreneur. And that's obviously the ups and downs, the ebbs and the flows. How do you find you and the people that you work with, how can you help accept that and actually use that as a positive?
That's a really great question. I think that it gets easier with time. I remember the first year of entrepreneurship for me. Looking back on it, it feels like it was a decade because 1 minute you're on top of the world and everything's possible, and the next minute you are in the depths of despair because you feel stupid for even trying, and nothing has gone your way, and it's much harder than you thought it was going to be. And then a few months goes by and you're back on top of the world again because you had some breakthrough, you had some podcast episode that was listened to by 1,000 people. And, how could you possibly fail now? And then the next week you're in the depths of despair again because you realize that one successful piece of content doesn't mean squat. There's a whole lot more work to do. And so you go up and down and up and down, and it can make a person crazy. And I think the goal is over time to learn what affects you and to not let things affect you so deeply. And then to start to leverage those effects to help you produce really great work so that when you are on top of the world, hopefully there's a voice in the back of your head that can say, this is great that you feel so excited about this, but remember that, things will change. But for now, at least for the next 2 weeks while you're on a high, let's really knock something out of the park and get this project done that we've been waiting on, and try to focus. And then when you're in the depths of despair, realize that there are some things that can help drag yourself out of it. And for me, the thing that I always come back to when I'm feeling like business isn't going well, or it's not, the future's not as rosy as I thought, is getting back to that one-on-one relationship with a particular client or a small handful of clients, and realize that you are able to help people one-on-one, and that what you say really does impact people. And go back to the well. Every time you feel down about it, go back to the well and realize that the success of your business is really related to your ability to help someone individually, and then to learn how to scale that individual experience that someone has so that you can serve more and more people. But getting to that point where you're serving more and more people takes a while. And so as long as you have a proven formula or an approach, or just you're a really great coach or mentor or whatever, and you're able to lead people through transformation, even if it's one-on-one, that really is the foundation, the cornerstone of what you will use to build a successful business.
Brilliant. Excellent. Okay. I love that. I'm really happy you answered that question the way you did, and I really appreciate the answer as well. So that was bellissimo. Now, awesome. Before we kind of wrap this out, Corbett, because we are getting a bit beyond time, we're getting a bit beyond ourselves, I've got 2 questions that I want to ask you. And these are the questions I ask every guest that comes on the Turning Pro Academy. And I just want you just to kind of like let the answer roll off your tongue. And the first one is, what is your definition of happiness?
My definition of happiness. I think my definition of happiness involves feeling at peace with who I am in the world and with the contributions that I have made and that I will make in the future.
Brilliant. Love it. And numero 2, what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for people like you, Chris, who pay attention to the work that I do, and for people who are out there, working hard to try to make their lives better and to try to influence the world around them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Corbett. I think that's very kind of you. Now, I know the listener is just frothing at the mouth to get to know more about you and everything that you're doing. So where can we go to find out more? How can we sink our teeth into it?
So I run a community and video training library for entrepreneurs, and it's called Fizzle. You can find out about it at fizzle.co. We have a free trial, which will give you access to weekly group coaching sessions. It will give you access to a community of 2,000 entrepreneurs who are trying to build small, independent, meaningful businesses, and access to a video training library with hundreds of videos about what it takes to create compelling content, to build a successful podcast, to signing up customers and earning revenue, everything in between.
Brilliant. Okay, we're going to make sure we link that in the show notes to get on over to there. Corbett, an absolute huge thank you for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time and absolutely unleashing your thoughts and advice. Kudos.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.
If you want to become the go-to, the leader, and the authority in your business, and you want a constant flow of new clients and sales all day, every day, go right now to turningproacademy.com. No more hype, BS, or wasted time. This is all real-world advice and strategies that the world's best use to 10x their businesses, generate more money, and get back their time. We'll see you next time on Turning Pro Academy.